homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri, homage to all the lineage masters. The supreme subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta. Now let us continue with our study of the Platform Sutra. We are currently exploring the personal experiences of various great masters as they relied upon their spiritual teachers. On the surface, it may seem as though Chapter 7, Causes and Conditions, is merely telling a series of stories. In reality, however, we can learn how the lineage masters of the past used specific methods to lead their disciples to enlightenment, and how disciples with faith and the right conditions attained realization. By analyzing the contrast and the differences between these two roles, I hope that after we conclude this teaching of the Platform Sutra, everyone who has received the complete oral transmission, whether in the cities or here at the Academy, will sit for an exam. Regarding the content of this exam, I would like the Education Department to keep a record of it, as we will eventually reach the end of the Platform Sutra. When that day comes, I will ask those who wish to make a Dharma offering to me through their studies to take this test. The exam will cover the general meaning of the entire Platform Sutra, including the main points discussed in this chapter, as well as what was covered in chapters 5 and 6. As a student of the Platform Sutra, you should have a summarized understanding of every single chapter. Throughout this process, although I have not accepted any material offerings from you, nor do I seek them, I would appreciate one kind of offering, a Dharma offering. However, this offering should not be like a hollow egg. If you were to provide a very meager offering, it is not that I am poor, but I would simply find it beneath regard. If I look at your exam and see that you haven't studied at all and are just participating for the sake of it, that would not be good. So, it is my hope that all students, including those here at the Academy, will finish the course. What I mean by oral transmission is having missed not a single class from the very beginning to the end. Even if you missed some, catching up via the internet or audio recording still counts as receiving the transmission of the Platform Sutra. For everyone who is studying, I hope there will be a final exam. For instance, in the various koans from Chapter 1, take the example of the Bhikkhuni Wujinzang, who read the Nirvana Sutra and primarily practiced that specific path. You should have a clear idea in your mind of what her story was. Since you are spending at least an hour listening to each class, to discard everything afterward, or to not listen attentively, is simply not the proper attitude for a student. When listening to the teachings, one should be like a wild animal captivated by the sound of a veena. As the words of my perfect teacher explains, we must listen with focus. What was the core message of that specific account? Regarding Fahai's story and the koan of the mind is Buddha, what was the general essence of that teaching? You should be able to grasp these concepts even without the book. Then there is Phada, whom we just mentioned as a devotee of the Lotus Sutra. Master Phada's story describes how he attained enlightenment and so forth. After studying the Platform Sutra, I have a specific requirement for you. You don't need to pore over every word to explain every single verse. That is not strictly necessary, but you should grasp the basic concepts. For instance, you might be asked to write down Phada's story from Chapter 7, or perhaps describe the different stories that make up Chapter 7, identifying the masters and the primary scriptures they practiced. I am looking for your understanding in very simple language. I hope that after finishing this sutra, you will at least be familiar with it. We have covered a portion already, and more will be discussed later. This process requires time for reflection and accumulation. Therefore, I hope you all begin to prepare yourselves mentally. Since many of you believe that my classes do not require an exam, as they aren't part of the 5 great treatises, I feel a bit hesitant. I worry that it might be difficult for the various classes to participate. I also feel that city dwellers may find a structured curriculum tiring. That is why I haven't made it a requirement, but this time I really wish to. I invest a great deal of time in teaching every single sutra. For example, regarding this coming Saturday, normally speaking, I am overwhelmed by so many tasks that it is extremely difficult. There are various school matters and many other responsibilities. You might view these activities as mere conceptual distractions, but I personally find them to be a very good form of practice. If I spent every day just reading the words from a book, the great compassion in my mind stream might not be as profound. For instance, over the last few days I was with some students living in poverty. I spent the entire day listening to their cries and seeing their tears. Teaching scriptures for a month might not arouse such a heart. So perhaps sometimes as a Buddhist, some practitioners keep their eyes closed and remain very solemn. They are afraid of being contaminated by external worldly influences, but whether you are ordained or a layperson, you still need training. If you haven't established even a small foundation in study, entering the secular world can present certain difficulties. Ideally, after 8 or 10 years of systematic study in a monastery, one's spiritual state should eventually bridge with society. As a Buddhist following the traditional path, for instance, in the Pratimoksha vows of early Buddhism, the conduct of the ordained is extremely solemn and dignified. Generally speaking, their overall behavior is quite conservative. This approach is very beneficial for a certain group of people. Just as within Theravada and Tibetan Buddhism today, there are individuals who focus specifically on the Vinaya. However, there is also a need for some to engage with the world. People in the secular world have heavy distractions and afflictions. If we simply ignore them and leave them all behind, who will spread the Dharma and guide sentient beings? We are needed. So I also hope that the Buddhists gathered here will restrain their behavior according to the traditional spirit. As long as you do not violate major principles or precepts, I believe we should also harmonize with the secular world. Otherwise, if we are always sitting in the 7-point Vairocana posture, it creates a sense of separation between society and Buddhism. Eventually, people might view the spirit of Buddhism as a very ancient ideology that no one can truly access. Even for those who have entered, it may seem as though none of the world's joys can be realized. This is why many lay people in the Han region fear their children or family members becoming monastics. They feel that once ordained, one has completely left this world, as if the person has ceased to be human. They find it very pitiable and heartbreaking, but that is not the case. Of course, monastics have different roles to play. Some may have social responsibilities and public presence that even exceed those of lay people. In such cases, harmonizing with the world is very necessary. For an ordained person, becoming too secularized might be off-putting to others. A monastic has their own set of principles to uphold. Similarly, for a layperson to be too secular without restraint is not ideal. However, being too rigid in certain situations makes it very difficult to harmonize with sentient beings. I recall hearing a story from a teacher regarding a specific speaking engagement where he participated. A Japanese monk was also present there. They went to a school or a similar venue to give a speech. The Japanese monk maintained a very solemn and dignified bearing, sitting very attentively without looking around. The teacher was also sitting there. Suddenly, the string of the monk's prayer beads snapped. The beads fell and scattered across the floor with a clatter, but the monk acted as if nothing had happened at all, remaining perfectly still and dignified as before. The teacher said if it were him, he would have picked them up immediately. This reflects a certain phenomenon. What does it mean? He emphasized dignified conduct, yet it seemed too artificial. When your beads are scattered on the ground, why not pick them up? Picking them up does not violate any precepts, yet he tried to appear so formal and serious in front of others. Even when the beads fell everywhere, he would not pick them up, pretending as if nothing had occurred. He just continued sitting there. What does this tell us? Sometimes dignity is required, but sometimes we must harmonize with the world. Otherwise, Buddhists may seem completely detached from reality. Many Western scientists research this topic. They examine which religions engage with the world and which ones are purely world-denying. If a religion is completely world-denying, ordinary people find it inaccessible and impossible to join. There are such perspectives and research. Therefore, as Buddhists, in certain situations, we should still, regardless of our actions, we should harmonize with and guide worldly people. However, excessive harmonization or over-engagement with them might also damage one's own aspiration for the path. In this regard, a wise person will know how to maintain the proper balance. The foolish often fall into extremes, being either too conservative or too open. Consequently, true methods for guiding sentient beings are hard to realize. What I was mainly emphasizing is that during our process of study, we should try not to abandon tradition, yet not be overly traditionalist. Otherwise, modern people will find it hard to accept. Why is that? Because modern people's thoughts, hobbies, and interests have changed. Even the terminology they use is no longer what people used to use, the terms we use in daily life. Especially modern youth, like those born in the 80s or 90s, have their own slang. The elderly and others often cannot understand what they are saying at all. When they use these specific terms in a conversation, everyone present might burst into laughter. But many elderly people won't know why they are laughing. They don't get it. So sometimes, as Buddhists, if we want to propagate the Dharma, we need to have some slight awareness of what people care about today. However, one does not need to spend a lot of time on this. Some practitioners pretend they are doing it to guide sentient beings, while in fact they are completely immersed in worldly conceptual thoughts. This is also an extreme. As practitioners, it is best to devote the bulk of our time to practice, but at the same time, we need to understand some worldly knowledge. That is my perspective on the matter. Next, we come to what should be the fourth case in the Platform Sutra. We have already finished the case of Phada. In this context, one should practice Zen without abandoning sutra recitation. This is very important. I hope that our fellow practitioners here, if you previously studied Sutrayana, do not abandon those studies. If you used to recite the Diamond Sutra, try your best to keep reciting. Never casually abandon any sublime dharma. Some people are always chasing the new and discarding the old. They follow one master today and then abandon their former one. After a while they grow tired of him and leave to follow another master. They keep switching constantly, much like a yak grazing. A yak grazes in one spot, then moves on as if there were nothing left to eat. Even if there is grass, it feels uneasy and keeps moving. It's always like this. I used to herd yaks when I was young. You could say I am an expert. Spiritual practice is much the same. It is best to maintain the prayers and practices one started long ago. For example, if we now recite the Guru Rinpoche mantra, Wang Du, or the 21 taras, you should still be reciting them 10 or 20 years from now. Even when you leave this world, you should still maintain them. This is the practice attitude of a very stable and steadfast person. I believe this kind of spirit and method of practice is excellent. I have met some fellow practitioners who were reading the Diamond Sutra 10 years ago and still read it now. Those who read the Heart Sutra 10 years ago are still reading it today. This demonstrates an eternal and unwavering faith, which is very important. So, as said here, it is best not to abandon these practices. The monk Zhitong was a native of Anfeng in Shouzhou, which is a place in present-day Anhui province. He first read the Lankavatara Sutra about 1,000 times, yet did not understand the Trikaya and Four Wisdoms. This monk used to read the Lankavatara Sutra every single day. The Lankavatara Sutra is highly regarded in the Zen tradition. He had already read it more than 1,000 times. The Lankavatara Sutra expounds on the Trikaya and Four Wisdoms, but he did not fully understand or grasp the principles behind them. So he went before the sixth Patriarch to seek an explanation. The Master said, "The pure Dharmakaya is your nature. The perfect Sambhogakaya is your wisdom. The myriad transformation bodies are your actions." This was the sixth Patriarch's reply, which is quite profound. It is an explanation that integrates with one's own Buddha nature. The sixth Patriarch told him that although he had read the sutra 1,000 times, which of course carries immense merit, in Tibet the Lankavatara is valued, though not quite like in the Han region. After Bodhidharma transmitted it, the second Patriarch began to propagate it. Thus, throughout Han Buddhist history, this sutra has been extremely vital. Actually, I was thinking about the Platform Sutra. In fact, every case and every disciple represents something specific. I wonder if you have noticed this or not. Therefore, if we were to compile the teachings of masters in the future, I think there might be different levels of recognition for practitioners and for their followers. Not everyone's records are necessarily included here. You see, there were likely many disciples before the sixth Patriarch, but the cases selected for this record include those who read the Lankavatara or the Lotus Sutra. Previously, there were readers of the Diamond Enlightenment Sutra or Nirvana Sutra. These are the primary scriptures upon which the Zen tradition relies. They represent different philosophical threads. I believe those who compiled it later had a certain selectivity. Moreover, if we study in detail, different sutras represent different ideas. These various ideas each have their own unique characteristics. Nowadays, many people specialize in researching one thing or another. In reality, many who truly study the Platform Sutra do not actually research its inner philosophical meaning. I've heard of certain experts who specialize in the Heart or Platform Sutras. I have heard that such people exist, but they probably study them entirely from an academic perspective. In fact, regarding academic research today, as I mentioned recently, academic research without faith generally will never reach a thorough realization of the inner meaning. For example, if I wanted to research Christianity, I should at least have a certain level of faith in it. Because so-called religion is not merely a theory, it also involves many realizations and requires faith. It requires a karmic connection to the teachings. As everyone's karma differs, their understanding of the Dharma or a master, as well as the insights and abilities gained, will be completely different. Take, for instance, two people's views on a single master. One person has great faith, while the other holds strong prejudices. When this master gives the exact same teaching, the person with faith will find many truths in those words that are beneficial to their own life. But the person with prejudices will gain nothing and instead only find many faults. It is just like how in the past non-Buddhists and Buddhists viewed the physical body of Shakyamuni Buddha differently. One saw perfect marks and signs, while the other saw various ugly features. Our karma certainly plays a decisive role in this. This is similar to a professor at a top university today. In worldly terms, we talk about whether we like a teacher, whether or not you have a favorable impression of them. If you lack a good impression of them from the very start, you will not be able to learn any knowledge from them. In Buddhism, we call this a matter of causes and conditions. Regarding the reply here, the so-called Trikaya actually have various explanations across different sutras and treatises. But when explaining according to the Platform Sutra, the pure Dharmakaya is in fact your inherent nature, the original nature of our mind, which is beyond birth and death. The perfect Sambhogakaya is actually various wisdoms manifesting from this unborn and undying nature manifesting as wisdom. This is also your wisdom. The myriad transformation bodies are your actions. This refers to the various illusory manifestations in the world. These billions of Nirmanakayas are actually your conduct. This means all your time and your entire life. This particular answer differs slightly from the Trikaya usually discussed in Buddhism. There are various explanations of the Trikaya in Sutra and Tantra. According to the Trikaya in the Sutrayana tradition, the Dharmakaya is the inconceivable Dharma Dhatu. One could also say it is the essence of the minds of sentient beings, but it does not manifest in any extreme. It is such a state. The Sambhogakaya possesses perfect form and 5 certainties: certainty of time, teacher, retinue, dharma, and environment. There are 5 certainties in total. The true Sambhogakaya is the form body shown to noble bodhisattvas. As discussed in the final chapter of the Abhisamaya Alamkara, it has the 32 marks and 80 signs. This is the Sambhogakaya. There are many Nirmanakayas, such as supreme and artisan emanations. All the various appearances before sentient beings, including those seen by impure beings, are called Nirmanakayas. This is accepted across both the common vehicles and the Mahayana tradition. Here, Dharmakaya is nature and Sambhogakaya is wisdom. The Nirmanakaya is this wisdom and nature operating in the world. This display or play of phenomena is called the Nirmanakaya. His explanation of the Trikaya can be understood this way. To speak of Trikaya apart from nature is to have form without wisdom. Realizing Trikaya lacks self-nature is the 4 wisdoms of Bodhi. According to the core thought of Zen, whether the Trikaya, 4 wisdoms, or any other Dharma principle, none can be separated from one's own nature. Indeed, without inherent nature, Buddhism cannot be explained. Vajrayana is also like this. Deeper Vajrayana teachings must ultimately ground in the essence. In the past, when Kyabje Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, even when teaching Abhidharmakosha or Pramana or explaining the common path, he would transition into Vajrayana once he reached pith instructions, ultimately into the profound Dzogchen. Sometimes the guru gave so many pith instructions that he felt he had gone almost too far to contain it. So for the lineage masters, when teaching deeply, they will inevitably speak of inherent nature. Because if we haven't realized our nature, all worldly appearances are just confusing illusions that defy description. Everything we currently see, hear, and experience are actually manifestations within an illusion. They are not real. If you truly want to grasp the root or trace the essence, you simply must talk about inherent nature. He also says here that without nature one cannot speak of Trikaya. To do so anyway is called having form without wisdom, because Trikaya and four wisdoms are inseparable. If nature has been left behind, even if you claim to have those bodies, there is no wisdom. In fact, wisdom and form cannot be divided in Mahayana Buddhism. Realizing the Trikaya lacks self-nature. If we realize that these Trikaya have no self-nature in essence, yet manifest with various functions and appearances, understanding this can be called the four wisdoms of Bodhi. Then, to help Zen master Zhitong understand further, this is actually a common occurrence in Buddhist sutras, including the Ksitigarbha or Medicine Buddha sutras. The Buddha first speaks in prose and then in verse, like the Samantabhadra vows or the Lotus Sutra. Even in our usual speech, we might talk for a while and finally conclude with a summary to wrap up. This also happens in worldly contexts. Next, he uses a verse to instruct us. Listen to my verse. Your nature possesses the Trikaya. Its discovery forms the four wisdoms. Without leaving the objects of perception, you transcendently ascend to the Buddha stage. I now explain this for you. Believe it truly and never be deluded again. Do not emulate those seekers who chase external things and talk about Bodhi all day long. The principles mentioned earlier are expressed here in this verse. Inherent nature for any sentient being possesses the Trikaya if its true meaning is realized. According to the Great Perfection teachings, regarding our current mind at the very moment a thought arises, the essence is Dharmakaya, the luminosity is Sambhogakaya, and their unity is Nirmanakaya. This is actually the most profound pith instruction of Padmasambhava. It is also very simple. No matter how much Zen says, Vajrayana can summarize it in a single sentence. Although Vajrayana and Zen are not contradictory, sometimes it is necessary to express different perspectives. Throughout history, the lineage masters show their unique characteristics when giving different pith instructions. So the nature itself inherently possesses the Trikaya. Once the Trikaya are realized, the four wisdoms are discovered. We will discuss the four wisdoms further below. In this state, there is no need to deliberately abandon worldly perceptions or phenomena. Without leaving the objects of perception, this is found in many Vajrayana teachings. In the beginning, you must recognize them. After recognition, this includes desire, anger, ignorance, jealousy, pride, and so on. When these afflictions manifest, recognize their nature, then there is no need to abandon them. In contrast, the Shravaka path of the Sutrayana views all afflictions as enemies to be abandoned and denied. After distancing and eliminating them, they shut the door of mindfulness to keep them outside. But according to the profound Mahayana and Vajrayana sutras, one does not actually abandon them or destroy the enemy. One should recognize them. After recognition, you see they were never enemies, nor were they desire, anger, or ignorance. You realize that desire, anger, and ignorance are actually the four wisdoms. Thus, without abandoning perception, one can transcendently ascend to the Buddha stage. Indeed, the true intent of Zen in the Sutrayana accords perfectly with Vajrayana. The sixth Patriarch said, I am telling you this profound pith instruction today. We inherently possess the Trikaya and four wisdoms right now. The Shravaka path does not speak of this, but Vajrayana explains it in great detail. When you have the chance, read Finding Rest in the Nature of the Mind. In my opinion, this is the encyclopedia of both Sutrayana and Vajrayana. All the pith instructions and theories are contained within it, from the initial difficulty of finding a human birth to the final Trikaya and four wisdoms. All pith instructions and theories have been fully explained. In fact, having translated it, I should have received an award, but no one paid attention to me. Nobody knew. Only today someone said, "Ah, you translated it very well." That made me happy for a long while. For ordinary beings, a single sentence can bring comfort and joy. Conversely, a single sentence can also be a heavy blow. If someone says your translation or writing is poor and tells you to stop, well, that feels hopeless and one's head drops. This is a work from 10 years ago, a translation from 10 years back. It has been 10 years already, right? When was Finding Rest in the Nature of the Mind finished? His Holiness taught it while he was here. When was that? It was translated in 2003, wasn't it? You are all in a daze, and so am I. This is what is called being a deluded sentient being, you know? There is a Tibetan proverb, but it seems hard to translate. The sixth patriarch said, "I am telling you today, this profound pith instruction, that we already possess the Trikaya and four wisdoms. You should believe truly and never be deluded. You should recognize this without doubt. When we study Vajrayana, we also often say, do not backslide or become confused regarding the nature you have recognized, including instructions found in the heart essence of the vast expanse. When someone is leaving this world, let them rest in the nature of the mind and not lose their way." If these words are repeated 3 times before the deceased, and if they had some prior realization of the great perfection, they may attain stability in the original state right then. So the sixth patriarch was giving a very profound pith instruction. Master Zhitong was likely a very valued vessel for this dharma. The master told him, "What I tell you today, do not speak of it casually everywhere. Don't say, 'The master gave me a pith instruction. See, he treats me well. He might not be good to you, but he is good to me.' It wasn't like that. He said, 'Keep a firm and unwavering faith yourself. Do not get lost or confused. Pith instructions are hard to obtain. Once you recognize the instruction, your mind will immediately reach some enlightenment. Do not emulate those seekers who talk about Bodhi all day long. They never look within their own minds. They are always seeking the Dharma and the fruit of Buddhahood externally. These people indeed talk all day about wanting Bodhi or wanting to practice. I want to practice, I want to go on retreat. They say it constantly. In reality, they might not observe their own mind for even half an hour a day. Those people are not true practitioners." So the sixth patriarch said regarding these teachings today, especially the Trikaya and four wisdoms valued in Vajrayana. Generally speaking, Vajrayana represents the state of the fruition. While we are on the path as ordinary beings, it directly points them out. This is why Zen has such rapid methods. For example, in Zen temples today, they often practice running meditation. Walk, 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 stop. At that moment, the various conceptual thoughts of an ordinary person are cut off. Actually, Zen running meditation is similar to our great perfection practice. The differentiating samsara and nirvana practice also has you think of everything. Think of all kinds of conceptual thoughts from the 6 realms. As you are thinking, you suddenly stop and sever the thoughts abruptly. In that moment, you recognize the conceptual thought and your own mind. This carries immense blessing and power. Therefore, spiritual practice is also very important. Zhitong spoke again. "May I hear the meaning of the 4 wisdoms?" He said, "What you explained earlier about the Trikaya was quite good. I basically understand it. However, Master, could you explain the meaning of the 4 wisdoms once more? Because your disciple is a bit slow, and I have a headache today. I didn't sleep well last night. I feel a bit confused about the 4 wisdoms I just heard." "I understand the Trikaya reasonably well," the master said. "If you grasp the Trikaya, you understand the 4 wisdoms. Why ask again?" He said, "Since you already know the Trikaya, the 4 wisdoms are already clear. Why do you need to ask me again? I am not feeling well today either. Don't ask me more." To talk of 4 wisdoms apart from Trikaya is called having wisdom without form. In such a case, even if there is wisdom, it becomes no wisdom at all. He said, "If you leave the Trikaya, there are no 4 wisdoms. Don't even talk about them. because outside of the Trikaya, the four wisdoms do not actually exist. Even if they did, it would be wisdom without form, wisdom without the Trikaya. Even if you call it wisdom, it is exactly the same as having no wisdom. We also study this in the Abhisamaya-lamkara. Other teachings also discuss the Trikaya as the support and the four wisdoms as what is supported. Some even speak of 5 kayas and 5 wisdoms, adding the Abhisambodhikaya and the Vajrakaya of the unchanging natural state to the Trikaya. As for the 5 wisdoms, Dharmadhatu, mirror-like, equality, all-accomplishing, and all-distinguishing wisdoms. These 5 types of wisdom are also taught. The Trikaya and 4 wisdoms here are discussed in terms of essence. As I mentioned just now, when speaking of the essence, the nature is the Dharmakaya, free from all elaborations. Then there is the form body, which is divided into Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. The Sambhogakaya is the form within the realm of bodhisattvas. Generally, beyond the manifested images of bodhisattvas and Buddhas, for example, Vajrasattva is a Sambhogakaya form, Shakyamuni Buddha is a Nirmanakaya form. The forms we see are different. Samantabhadra, the Dharmakaya itself, is not described by physical form, but when represented as a form, it is usually blue. Blue symbolizes the sky. Space means having nothing at all. His attire and ornaments are basically non-existent. This represents the naked Dharmadhatu. It is a different type of body. So the Trikaya as the support are entirely a type of appearance. Especially regarding the Nirmanakaya, relevant treatises explain it further. The supreme Nirmanakaya is like Shakyamuni Buddha, accumulating merit on the path, then manifesting enlightenment and turning the wheel of Dharma. The 12 deeds of the Buddha are called the supreme signs. In other emanations, within the 6 realms of reincarnation, for example, the lion among animals, chakra, or the pure-minded diva. Different forms among hungry ghosts and animals. The Lotus Sutra also mentions these so-called Nirmanakayas. Sometimes they appear as Brahmins, sometimes as hungry ghosts, even as beings in hell to guide and liberate others. We shouldn't think that all of the Buddha's emanations are perfect and majestic. There are Buddha emanations among animals and among us humans too. In Tibetan, these emanations are called tulku. Tulku is what is now commonly called a living Buddha in Chinese. Living Buddha truly means a Nirmanakaya. These emanations exist among humans and even among yaks. So among those people called living Buddhas, there are yak, hungry ghost, and hell-being tulkus, including those among birds. For instance, there are tulkus among pigs, dogs, and other animals. We shouldn't think that tulkus only exist among Tibetans. Among Tibetans, most are male tulkus. Female tulkus are relatively rare, but we shouldn't think of it that way. Tulkus should be everywhere. Now, there are more and more tulkus in Chinese cities. Why? Because they are Nirmanakayas. They can take any form. You might feel a bit lost now about what I'm saying. The Nirmanakaya is also mentioned in the Sutra on entering the inconceivable state of wisdom. Gardens, medicine, and jewels are also Buddha emanations. For example, I often go to pleasant places, such as a garden or park where many people gather. It could very well be a Buddha emanation in the form of inanimate matter, including our medicine. As the Upayakaushalya Sutra states, a light seen by a lost person is also a Buddha emanation. The sutras state this very clearly. The Ratnakuta Sutra also mentions elephants and mounts as emanations. I hope we can sometimes maintain a pure perception. How? Anything that brings benefit to sentient beings can be a Buddha or Bodhisattva emanation in any form. So we must not easily slight or insult any being. When we see a beggar or a disabled person or someone who is very ugly or has impaired senses, if we detest or hate them, that is not right. We have shared many stories regarding this before. In our relative reality, the so-called Nirmanakaya appears in various forms before impure beings. The term for Nirmanakaya is what people now call a living Buddha. I don't know when this term became literally a living Buddha. That is how it is in Chinese. In English, the term tulku, or emanation body, is more authentic. It hasn't drifted as far from the original meaning as the Chinese term. Regardless, everyone should know. Among the Trikaya, the Nirmanakaya is someone in our lives or community we might not recognize our whole life. For instance, among people, they may pretend to be an ordinary person, but in reality, their speech and actions guide sentient beings. It is very likely there are many emanations among animals. On the surface, they eat grass and drink water like any other animal, but in truth, they possess the power to benefit others. Previously, when we were discussing the aspiration of Sukhavati, I shared a story about Dashi's pig near Mount Emi. Do you remember? There are many such cases, but I won't go into detail here for now. Next, the Patriarch uses a verse to explain the four wisdoms. Actually, questioners should aim to be concise like this. Nowadays, some questioners just go on and on. Is he answering the question or asking one? They talk about their own stories or their own states of realization. In the end, we don't know whether to praise them or what to say. Sometimes the questioner becomes the answerer, leaving the actual answerer with only a single sentence to say. When a questioner talks too much, I sometimes just say, "Yes, yes, that's right," and that's it. The verse continues. The great mirror-like wisdom is pure in nature. The wisdom of equality keeps the mind free from disease. The all-distinguishing wisdom sees without effort. The all-accomplishing wisdom is like the mirror-like wisdom. The 5, 8, 6, and 7 are transformed in fruit and cause. These are merely names without substantial nature. If one remains unattached at the point of transformation, one eternally abides in the Naga Samadhi amidst the bustle of the world. He says the great mirror-like wisdom is the pure inherent nature. The wisdom of equality means the mind is free from the disease of duality, subject and object, pleasure and pain, relative and absolute. The all-distinguishing wisdom sees all phenomena effortlessly, without the need for artificial striving or exertion. The all-accomplishing wisdom is like a mirror. It manifests everything without having an inherent nature. This is how he explains the four wisdoms here. Many of you should be clear on this. There is also the wisdom of the Dharmadhatu. Actually, the nature of reality which is free from all extremes and elaborations is the wisdom of the Dharmadhatu. That is one type of wisdom. However, many scriptures speak of 4 wisdoms instead of 5. The great mirror-like wisdom mentioned here is actually what we usually call the Alaya Vijnana. It is the luminous, non-conceptual nature of the Alaya Vijnana. Finding rest in the nature of the mind explains this very clearly. It is the foundation of the other 3 wisdoms. Our current Alaya Vijnana gradually transforms into the great mirror-like wisdom. This is the wisdom at the level of the Dharmakaya, an inseparable wisdom. Then there is the wisdom of equality. Our pride, one of the 5 poisons, is gradually transformed into the wisdom of equality. The wisdom of equality allows one to realize both the essence and the appearance of all phenomena. At this point, the relative and absolute, or pleasure and pain, are of one taste and one essence. In this state, everything is equal. Therefore, it is a wisdom of the Sambhogakaya. If we distinguish between the wisdom of the way and the wisdom of nature, then these 2 wisdoms belong to the wisdom of nature. The great mirror-like wisdom and wisdom of equality are within the wisdom of nature. Next is the all-distinguishing wisdom. Our desire is transformed into the all-distinguishing wisdom. Through this wisdom, one fully understands all that can be known in the world and severs all doubts. Relying on this wisdom, one can shower the rain of Dharma. It dispels doubts, brings down the Dharma rain, and allows various samadhis to manifest. So this is called the all-distinguishing wisdom. It also entails complete knowledge of all relative phenomena. All the world's false views are known through the Buddha's all-distinguishing wisdom. It belongs to the wisdom of the Nirmanakaya and is part of the knowledge of all phenomena. Then there is the all-accomplishing wisdom. Our jealousy is transformed into the all-accomplishing wisdom. In fact, it has infinite manifestations. Relying on the purity of body, speech, and mind, there are boundless ways to benefit beings. The activity of benefiting beings arises spontaneously. This is the all-accomplishing wisdom. This wisdom usually operates without effort. Through the inconceivable power of body, speech, and mind, it can liberate countless beings. This is all-accomplishing wisdom. It is the knowledge of all phenomena and of the Nirmanakaya. Among the 4 wisdoms, 2 belong to the Nirmanakaya. The wisdom of equality is of the Sambhogakaya, and the mirror-like wisdom is of the Dharmakaya. This is why the sixth patriarch said earlier that there is no difference between the Trikaya and four wisdoms. In fact, if you recognize the nature of your own mind, then the four wisdoms are perfected. For instance, when you observe your mind and recognize its nature, your desire is purified. Purified desire is the all-distinguishing wisdom. Purified anger is the great mirror-like wisdom. Purified pride is the wisdom of equality. Purified jealousy is the all-accomplishing wisdom. And the purification of our ignorance is called the wisdom of the Dharmadhatu. Thus, the transformation of the five poisons into the five wisdoms is not a myth. Right now, at the very moment anger arises, if you recognize its nature, you see it is the great mirror-like wisdom. When you are feeling desire and you truly recognize its essence, it becomes the all-distinguishing wisdom. So regarding the five poisons, we often say, afflictions are bodhi. This saying is not without reason. It refers to these five wisdoms existing within us right now. Furthermore, he says, the 5, 8, 6, and 7 are transformed in fruit and cause. These are merely names without substantial nature. We often speak of the 5 sensory consciousnesses and the 6th consciousness, which is the mental consciousness. The 7th is the manas, also known as the afflicted consciousness. The 8th is called the alaya vijnana. Among these, the 5 sensory consciousnesses and the 8th are transformed at the level of the fruit. In the Yogacara school, it is often said that the 5th and 8th are perfected in the fruit. The 6th consciousness and the 7th manas are transformed at the level of the cause. Yogacara frequently says the 6th and 7th are transformed in the cause. This mode of transformation exists in conventional terms. In reality, there is nothing to transform. In the ultimate state, there is no transformer or transformed. If one remains unattached at the point of transformation, if, during the process of transformation, you remain free of worldly emotional entanglements and leave behind all worldly attachments, then such a person eternally abides. Amidst the bustle, meaning within a very complex and flourishing environment, even in such a complex world, one will eternally abide in the Naga Samadhi. In some commentaries, the Naga Samadhi is called the Dragon Samadhi. As for the Dragon Samadhi, whether for Buddhas or sentient beings, there are different levels of realization. Buddhas abide in the meditative state of wisdom. Sentient beings abide in the meditative state of affliction and distraction. This is also referred to as the Naga Samadhi. Some say it is like the meditative state of Mahakasyapa, who waits in Samadhi until the appearance of Maitreya Buddha. This kind of Samadhi is called Naga Samadhi. In any case, what is the meaning? When all 8 consciousnesses are transformed into wisdom, then whether you are walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, you are always abiding in meditative concentration. As we discussed before, it is very difficult to transform the 5 sensory consciousnesses right now. They are only transformed at the stage of Buddhahood. Generally, in the exoteric school, the 5 consciousnesses and the alaya vijnana are said to transform from the 8th bhumi upward. The afflicted consciousness, manas, usually transforms at the 7th bhumi. Regarding this afflicted consciousness, Mipham Rinpoche states in Gateway to Knowledge, what is the afflicted consciousness? It actually refers to the consciousness characterized by the view of I. It is a consciousness combined with 4 types of views: the view of self, self-pride, self-attachment, and self-ignorance. The consciousness that originates from the alaya vijnana is called the afflicted consciousness. I see many commentaries in the Han region that don't truly understand the manas. It does not exist during the states of noble beings or during meditative absorption. In true meditative absorption, such a view of I, self-grasping, self-pride, ignorance, and the self-attachment I just mentioned, clinging to me, attachment to me, ignorance of me, and pride in me. This consciousness of these 4 views is a specific part of the mind. Outside of the states of noble beings, meditative absorption, or the fruit of Buddhahood, this is the consciousness that always exists in ordinary people. It is called the manas. This is the definition given in Mipham Rinpoche's Gateway to Knowledge, which I translated recently. I hope you remember it, but it seems you aren't taking notes, are you? You must have excellent memories. I rejoice in that. Thus, consciousness is transformed into wisdom. The teachings say, transform the first 5 consciousnesses into the all-accomplishing wisdom. Transform the 6th consciousness into the all-distinguishing wisdom. Transform the 7th consciousness into the wisdom of equality. And transform the 8th consciousness into the great mirror-like wisdom. Although the 6th and 7th are transformed in the cause, and the 5th and 8th are transformed in the fruit, only the names are changed, not the essence. I recall that in the Great Chariot commentary on finding rest in the nature of the mind, it also explains the meaning of transformation. Asraya parivirti is not that the original cause is severed and then a brand new fruit is produced. It doesn't mean that. The so-called transformation of the original state. For instance, the original 5 sensory consciousnesses, they are completely a kind of... It's not about discarding the cause to become the fruit. It is simply taking it a step further to become pure. The essence remains the same. It is like gold ore. It was gold all along. It is merely revealed after purification. Therefore, regarding our current 6th or 8th consciousnesses, when this consciousness becomes wisdom, it's not that we discard the 6 types of consciousness we have now and then produce something new, like a seed blooming into a flower. It's not like that. It is entirely a manifestation of what was already there. Recall the analogy we used of the prince who became a beggar. When he finally takes the throne, he is still the same person who was wandering as a beggar. At that time, he simply didn't recognize his true identity. Taking the throne is just realizing it. Right now, we don't recognize our own manas or our own 6th consciousness. They are the all-distinguishing wisdom, the wisdom of equality, and so on. When you truly recognize them, they are still what they were. This is transformation. This transformation is a technical term used in the Yogacara school and others. This is very important. Transforming consciousness into wisdom, turning the original consciousness into wisdom. Zhitong suddenly realized the wisdom of nature and presented a verse. Look at that. Zhitong attained sudden enlightenment on the spot. I wonder if we have enlightened yet, or did we just fall asleep on the spot? Did anyone? No one fell asleep, but I saw some of the newly arrived lay practitioners who seemed to have that expression. The Trikaya are originally my own essence. The 4 wisdoms are the original clarity of my mind. Kayas and wisdom merge without hindrance. Responding to things, they take any form. He says, we already possess the Trikaya, and the 4 wisdoms are the original essence of our own mind. The Trikaya and 4 wisdoms are perfectly integrated without conflict or hindrance. Every sentient being possesses them. You possess them, I possess them, he possesses them. Everyone does. Some simply recognize them. Those who recognize them are realized beings. Some do not recognize them and even develop wrong views toward them. Thus they wander in samsara. So we respond to things and take any form, each according to different circumstances. If you truly recognize this, the Trikaya are present at all times and in all places. Walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, it is all the play of the Trikaya and 5 wisdoms. This is entirely possible for a realized being. For an ordinary person, walking, standing, sitting, and lying down are all experienced in confusion, delusion, and pain. That is also how it manifests spontaneously. This is also how they liberate beings. To begin practice is mere deluded motion. To hold on to it is not the true essence. The wondrous meaning is understood through the master. Finally, the name of defilement is gone forever. He says here, if we give rise to thoughts and exert effort to practice, this is a type of deluded motion. It is not truly finding the truth. If we keep trying to hold on, insisting we must abide or enter samadhi, holding on to a single focal point, this is not the true essence. When we lack recognition, giving rise to thoughts and discriminating externally, that too is a deluded phenomenon. Trying to force the mind to abide, or desperately preventing it from wandering, abiding, and then it wanders again. It's like someone trying to control a naughty child all day long. That would be very exhausting. When ordinary people don't know the pith instructions, we indeed find it very tiring. If you understand these instructions, the Trikaya and 5 wisdoms are already complete. So generally in Zen or among many masters of the secret mantrayana, when they recognize the nature of reality, they are quite relaxed. There is no need for such strain. Mifam Rinpoche and His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok mentioned this in many Dzogchen songs of realization. To die now would be perfectly fine, for one has recognized the nature of the mind. To live is also very good. Everything is the play of the Trikaya and 4 wisdoms. It is very joyful. Everything manifests spontaneously and is spontaneously perfected. There is no need to be constantly stuck, either trying to abide or worrying. This ultimate meaning. Today, through the Master's pith instructions and kindness, I have come to know it. From now on, even the name of defilement can no longer be found. Truly enlightened ones are so blessed, so free and so happy. Those of us who are still confused are very envious, aren't we? Worldly objects are unattainable. To give rise to a grasping mind is called ignorance. In reality, there is nothing in the world that can be attained. It is only our deluded grasping thoughts that create attachment. This is called the ignorant mind. It is also what makes one a sentient being, an ordinary person. We ordinary people take things that don't exist and treat them as real. We take things that aren't true and grasp at them as truth. This is our ordinary mindset. I truly hope that, like Zen Master Zhitong, we can rely on the pith instructions of the Masters. In Zen, the gratitude toward the Master flows out naturally from his words. Originally, giving rise to thoughts was wrong, and just abiding was also wrong. Everything seemed like a contradiction. But today, through the Master's instructions, the true ultimate hidden meaning of the sutras is known through the Master's kindness. Many of Sarahapa's teachings also frequently mention, all wish-fulfilling jewels depend on the Master's kindness. Through it, I have realized today. This was quoted in the Great Chariot commentary on Finding Rest in the Nature of the Mind. Venerable Longchenpa quoted it many times. You should be able to remember it. Your memories are so good. All right, we will stop here for today.
Bandara Banma Sadar